Whilst Season 8 Game of Thrones might as well have been written by a fish with Parkinson's, some of the scenes still give a nod to some of the quality writing in the previous 7 seasons. One of these scenes is a scene where Tyrion is able to convince Jon, and spoiler alert, to kill Daenerys. In this video I'm going to be quickly breaking down the persuasion techniques that Tyrion is using and the techniques that you can use to make people more likely to take your advice. So real quick, let's get straight into it. So first things first, we have to contextualize it. And the context here is that it's a one-on-one conversation. So that means that some of these techniques won't necessarily apply, particularly in things like group persuasion.
Did you bring any wine?
No.
Well, thank you for coming to see me.
So this might seem like a bizarre way to start when you wanted to give someone advice, but it's actually vital. See, what Tyrion is doing here is building rapport. He's trying to take Jon's guard down. Obviously, Jon is very conscious of what he's going to be saying in this situation, considering that in the eyes of his queen, Tyrion is a traitor. So whilst he's also trying to take Jon's guard down, he's also very conscious not to immediately come at Jon with an argument. Now this is really the whole premise of the video. The reason why people don't take advice, and most people refuse to take advice or heed advice because they don't feel like they made the decision and it was their thought process. And for them to accept an idea from someone else would be to infer that they know more about them and that they're better than them.
Our queen doesn't keep prisoners for long. I suppose there's a crude kind of justice. I betrayed my closest friend and watched him burn. Now Varys' ashes can tell my ashes. See? I told you. It just occurred to me. I'm talking to the only man alive who knows where I'm going. So is there life after death?
Not that I've seen.
I should be thankful. Oblivion is the best I could hope for.
This is actually a very smart question from Tyrion here. This is because he includes the assumption that he is going to die, but does it very subtly. So this means that now Jon is thinking about death and his time with death. But Tyrion doesn't do it in a way that's personal to himself. So it's not like he's trying to get Jon to kill Daenerys for his own gain. In this scene it comes across like Tyrion has very much accepted his fate.
I strangled my lover. I shot my own father with a crossbow. I betrayed my queen.
You didn't.
I did.
Here Tyrion is using self-awareness and accepting his flaws. He's doing this for starters to frame the debate, so these things cannot be used against him. And so Jon then knows that Tyrion is not trying to argue that he is a great person, but he's trying to argue that he's doing what is right.
And I'd do it again now that I've seen what I've seen. I chose my fate. The people of King's Landing did not.
So this is Tyrion now framing the debate. He doesn't want to get caught in the idea of whether his betrayal wasn't a betrayal. Instead he just gives it context and then he brings it on to the major point and where he thinks he can appeal to Jon most, which is the innocent lives that were killed at King's Landing. He's also trying to give Jon an insight into his motives and what he gets out of this. And to this he gives Jon the idea that in fact Tyrion has accepted his own fate, but his real concern now lies with the people of King's Landing and Westeros.
I can't justify what happened. I won't try. But the war is over now.
Is it?
So the line "is it" is delivered masterfully here. He's trying to display to Jon the flaw in his own logic. Instead of arguing against Jon and making Jon get defensive, He's merely asking him questions and allowing him to see the flaws in his own logic.
When you heard her talking to her soldiers, did she sound like someone who's done fighting?
Tyrion then uses a noise vacuum here to emphasize his point, and also to allow Jon to appreciate what Tyrion is actually saying and Tyrion's point.
She liberated the people of Slaver's Bay. She liberated the people of King's Landing. And she'll go on liberating until the people of the world are free. And she rules them all.
And you've been by her side, counseling her. Until today.
Until today.
Here, Tyrion is using an agreement pattern. He's using the agreement pattern partly so he doesn't get trapped in the argument of what his role was in Daenerys turning to become the Mad Queen. He's also appealing to Jon's sense of duty and pride. He's taking responsibility for his actions. But he's trying to make Jon understand that this isn't about him, Tyrion. This is about the bigger picture. And using his agreement pattern is allowing him to keep frame and drive the conversation in the direction that he wants it to go. He's using Jon's acknowledgement that he was Hand of the Queen now as evidence to drive home his point.
Danerys was right. I was wrong. It was vanity to think I could guide her. Our queen's nature is fire and blood.
Again, Tyrion's subtle nod to Varys here is an appeal to authority. He's saying, look, there are multiple smart and intelligent people that believe the same thing that I believe. It's also a good way of continuing on the conversation, creating a dummy.
You think our house words are stamped on our bodies when we're born, and that's who we are? Ah, then I'd be fire and blood too. She's not her father, no more than your Tywin Lannister.
My father was an evil man. My sister was an evil woman. Pile up all the bodies of all the people they ever killed. There still won't be half as many as our beautiful queen slaughtered in a single day.
There are a few things going on in that exchange there, which I'll quickly break down for you one by one. Jon makes a good point that Tyrion's argument can't necessarily be taken seriously, because if she is merely the motto of her house, then what does that make them? Tyrion then decides to very quickly divert and state that he knows that his house isn't perfect. His acknowledgement of his imperfections of his house means that he can then use an appeal by comparison to Jon. Well, if you believe that my sister is evil and my father is evil, then what does that make Daenerys? He really drives it home by using imagery, imagining the bodies being piled up. The comparison works to further amplify Tyrion's argument and his point. Also, the way he structures his sentence is very persuasive. He allows Jon to imagine the bodies being piled up, and then reveals the comparison to Daenerys and her body count. This means that Jon's brain can't immediately reject the thought that Tyrion is discussing. He uses the term, our beautiful queen, when referring to Daenerys. He's using it almost as a statement of empathy to show Jon that he still thinks that Daenerys is his queen and that he is on his side, but these are just the realities that he has seen.
You left her no choice.
The moment the gates fell, the battle was over.
She saw her friend beheaded. She saw her dragon shot out of the sky.
And she burned down a city for it.
Ah, it's easy to judge when you're standing far from the battlefield.
Would you have done it?
Again, Tyrion is using a question so he can see Jon make up his own mind. He's also asked the question because he's realised that this conversation has started to get more and more emotional and therefore less productive.
What?
You've been up there, on a dragon's back. You've had that power. Would you have burned the city down?
I don't know.
Yes, you do. You won't say because you don't want to betray her. But you know.
Again, he's not going to push Jon for an answer. Instead, he gives a statement of empathy. His goal is not to get Jon to say, Tyrion, you know what, you're right. At the end of the day, Tyrion is going to benefit from Jon's actions. He doesn't need him to acknowledge that he's right now.
Must it matter what I do?
Here, Jon is trying to create a third option for himself as a way to get out, asking does it matter? Look, instead of Tyrion giving a complex answer to this question, he's going to call his bluff and just say, yes it does.
It matters more than anything.
It's also worth noting here that Tyrion gives his response in the same sentence structure as Jon does, using the same words, so the response is not lost in translation and it has the same meaning to Jon. He's also slowed down the way he speaks and he's using the same volume that Jon is. This is called matching and he's doing it to build rapport, to make Jon feel more comfortable whilst discussing this very uncomfortable topic.
When she murdered the slavers of Astapor,
It's interesting here that Tyrion uses the word murder because it makes it seem more unlawful than perhaps the general word killing.
I'm sure no one but the slavers complained. After all, they were evil men. When she crucified hundreds of Myronese nobles, who could argue they were evil men? The Dothraki carls she burned alive, they would have done worse to her. Everywhere she goes, evil men die, and we cheer her for it. And she grows more powerful and more sure that she is good and right.
Here, Tyrion is using selective anecdotal evidence of stories of her repeat behaviour to send home his point, and also to emphasise the negative impact she could have.
She believes her destiny is to build a better world for everyone. If you believed that, if you truly believed it, wouldn't you kill whoever stood between you and paradise?
Again, a question accompanied with a noise vacuum, allowing Jon to make up his own mind. He also gives Daenerys credit here. He gives her credit that her goals are in fact noble, and she's not necessarily a bad person. But it's her attitude and her methods to achieving these goals that's flawed. He knows there's no way he can convince Jon, who's in love with Daenerys, to believe that she's a bad person. Therefore he's saying that you can do both. You can acknowledge that she wants to do well and she wants to do good, but that she's not going to be able to achieve that using her current methods, and that she is unwilling and unbending for change.
I know you love her. I love her too. Not as successfully as you, but I believed in her with all my heart.
Here again, Tyrion is using a statement of empathy to put him and Jon on the same team, and so Jon feels like he's understood, but also that him and Tyrion have the same end goal.
Love is more powerful than reason. We all know that. Look at my brother.
This is actually a really smart move here by Tyrion. He's using a disqualifier. Now, disqualifiers are incredible for making people feel like they made up their own mind. You know, turning around and saying, well, maybe this isn't for you, or if it's not for you, I understand, makes people want to prove themselves and to qualify themselves to you, which is what you're about to see with Jon here. It's also worth noting Tyrion's body language here. He turns as if he's going to face away from Jon, isolating him.
Love is the death of duty.
You just came up with that.
Maester Aemon said it a long time ago.
Sometimes duty is the death of love.
Here, Tyrion reframes and restructures the sentence so it appears familiar to the sentence that Jon just said, only the meaning is very different. So he will see this as a reconstruction of a thought that he had, due to its familiarity. Using this slightly contrived version of antanaclasis means that Tyrion has changed the meaning of the word duty, instead making it powerful over love. And this draws attention to it, and therefore means that Jon is more likely to remember it when making his final decision.
You are the shield that guards the realms of men. You've always tried to do the right thing, no matter the cost. You've tried to protect people. Who is the greatest threat to the people now?
Here, Tyrion is doing a very smart thing, which is he is ascribing traits to Jon. You can do this in your everyday life. You say, look, I know you're a good person. I know you do the right thing. These are broadly ambiguous statements, but people like to hear them, and it makes them feel not judged, and so they can open up and actually discuss their feelings and their decisions with you, and ultimately play up to how they believe that you perceive them to be, and how they identify themselves.
It's a terrible thing I'm asking. It's also the right thing. Do you think I'm the last man shall execute? Who is more dangerous than the rightful heir to the Iron Throne?
So here again, this is just another tactic that Tyrion has used multiple times now, giving a statement of empathy, acknowledging that he understands this is a terrible thing that he's asking Jon to do, which is why he spent so much time ascribing Jon good traits before, to say that, you know, I know you'll do the right thing, and this is the right thing. And then obviously he follows up with a question, so Jon can feel like he's making up his own mind. It's also worth noting that Tyrion has never directly said what he's asking Jon to do. Such is the nature of asking questions and the powerful persuasion techniques that Tyrion is using, that he already knows that Jon can identify the thought that Tyrion is getting at.
If that's her decision, she is the queen.
And here Jon is perhaps revealing something really powerful about himself. As he was raised by Ned Stark, he is a child of duty and honour, and therefore you can see the values that Ned Stark has instilled in Jon, and therefore Tyrion knows he now needs to appeal to Jon's sense of honour and duty and loyalty to his family.
I'm sorry it came to this.
and your sisters. Do you see them bending the knee?
And as I briefly touched on before, here he has realised this is how Jon identifies himself. These are the stories that Jon tells himself, and therefore he knows that Jon will care about his sisters and his family, and ultimately the Starks, more than he will care about himself.
My sisters will be loyal to the throne.
Why do you think Sansa told me the truth about you? Because she doesn't want Dany to...
And here Tyrion is using a leading statement. This is also the advantage of when you switch the timelines and start thinking longer term about the longer consequences. You can be very speculative and ambiguous on the impact people's decisions are going to have, and you can let it play out in their mind.
be queen.
She doesn't get to choose.
No, but you do. And you have to choose now.
Again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, you can see the pattern here. Tyrion agrees with Jon that he's right. Sansa doesn't get to choose, but Jon in fact does. But also notice the fact that Tyrion does not force a conclusion onto Jon. He just says you have to decide now. This is it. Therefore he ups the pressure on Jon. So I hope you all enjoyed this breakdown. I understand it's been quite long, almost 22 minutes now, but this is just a brief summary of the points I really made in the video. To use statements of empathy, rhetorical questions, to disqualify yourself, to change the timeline and the frame of which they view things, using imagery so they imagine the scenarios that you're talking about, and arguably most importantly, ascribing traits, letting them know that you think they're a good person, and understanding that people are ultimately the stories they tell themselves. So you should at least give them the idea of that freedom that they made the decision themselves. If you've got any thoughts or opinions, let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to see more stuff like this, let me know. And other than that, please hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.